Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to have so much fun. We're going to be playing with the Tim Holtz Distress Embossing Glazes. And we're also going to be using a beautiful butterfly from his collection. So let's go ahead and get started. So for the die, we're using this beautiful Tim Holtz Perspective Butterfly from the Sizzix Thinlits collection. And this is quite large. It measures approximately 6¼ inches across the widest point, and then it's about 5¼ inches tall, so it's quite large. We're going to go ahead and die cut this from some Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. But I'm going to set the die aside just for a moment while we do some stamping. I'm using the Hero Arts Bold Prints. This is the script. And this is a 6x6" stamp. So in order to place it in my MISTI, I'm going to remove that foam pad because this is a thick red rubber cling stamp. So I don't need that foam pad. I've placed my paper in my MISTI and the stamp. I've just kind of centered that right on that card panel. And I'm going to go ahead and ink this up. I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a permanent black ink. So I'll go ahead and do my stamping. I just want to press this out really well. You can see my MISTI's bouncing around a little bit there, and I realized later on I had a magnet stuck underneath there. So normally it should lay flat when you're doing your stamping. So now we've got that stamped, and I'm going to take that die now. I'll center it on this panel, and I'll go ahead and die cut that. Now I'm going to run that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. I'll run it through twice, and then what I'm going to do is take those top 2 plates and I'll flip those right over and I'll run that through 2 more times. This way I can get some different pressure on here, and that'll just make sure that I die cut out all those little tiny pieces there. So now I'll grab my Sizzix sculpting mat. That's just a foam mat. I'm going to place that down on my glass media mat, and then I'll use my Spellbinders tool-in-one. I'm going to use this bristle brush side of the tool, and I'll just kind of run that over the top, and that's going to pop out all those little pieces. Now I can remove the die, and then I'm just going to remove any little pieces that are left over there. Now let me clean this off so you can get a closer look at this, and you can see now that we have that beautiful stamping in the background here. And that's going to show through when we use our Tim Holtz Distress Embossing Glazes. Now I have several of them here, and there are several more available as well. And what I'm going to do is just pick 3 colors here to do my first butterfly. But I did want to show you that they're all labeled and they coordinate with all of the ink pads and paints and distress sprays that you already have. So there's Salty Ocean and Picked Raspberry, and all the other colors again coordinate with the other products in the Tim Holtz collection. So for the first butterfly, I'm going to grab the Picked Raspberry and the Wilted Violet and also the Wild Honey. So I'm going to put down some copier paper here just to keep my area clean while I do my embossing. And I'm using the Emboss It Dauber. This is an embossing ink. This is by Ranger. And you can see that it has a foam top on it. And I can just press it down and it will release that embossing ink. So it's just a clear ink. And I'm going to start in the center of my butterfly. I'm going to try not to get any on the antennas there. And I don't want to go out too far. I'm just going to start adding that ink. Now you could certainly use an ink pad here, but you are going to get some more harsh lines. With the dauber, you can kind of just put it exactly where you want that ink to be. And then I'm using my Nuvo dual tip spoon just to add a little bit of an embossing powder here. Again, this is the Distress Embossing Glaze, so it's translucent. You can see that by doing that stamping underneath, we're going to be able to see that stamping when we emboss this. And that's really the unique feature of this, is you're going to get that beautiful inking coming through underneath. And then it's going to give us this beautiful shiny glaze over the top. So let me go ahead. I heated up my heat tool a little bit beforehand, and then when you emboss this, it's going to get really shiny. It's going to get this beautiful shine to it. So you'll know that it's embossed when it's nice and shiny. Now I want to go over this, so I'm going to add a little bit more of that color down the center. It'll still be translucent, but it's going to be a little bit darker. So this is a nice way to add a little bit more interest here. So I just went down the center of my butterfly with a little bit more of that powder, and I'm going to go ahead and heat set that as well. Now I can add a little bit more here and there if I want to. So I did decide to add a little bit more embossing powder down that center again. And so you can layer this up as many times as you want to, but you will still be able to see through this. So now I'll go ahead and heat set that again, and you can see that it's getting a little bit darker, and I filled in some of those areas that were a little bit light. So now what I want to do is apply my ink over top of that purple, that Wilted Violet. I'm just going over those edges just a little bit and then coming out on the butterfly. So now I'm going to go to that picked raspberry, and you'll see where that Wilted Violet and the picked raspberry overlap. We're going to get this beautiful color. So now I can just sprinkle it on because I'm not as fussy about where it's going to be. This area is a lot larger, so I can go ahead and just sprinkle on that embossing powder. And then each time you do want to make sure you put that right back in the container, and you don't want to contaminate your colors. So I'm going to be using a separate piece of copier paper for each color. I did see there that I hadn't switched papers. So you do want to make sure you switch out the papers or have a little container for each of your colors. So now you can see where those two colors overlap there, with the purple and the picked raspberry overlapped, and you're going to get this beautiful color. So now again, I'm adding another layer. I'm just going to add a little bit more. I find that the one layer doesn't completely fill in, and that may be the look that you're going for, and that's certainly fine. But I wanted to get a nice glaze and color all over the top of this. So I'm going to go ahead and do this second coat. Again, I'm heat setting that, and when it's nice and shiny, you know that it's done. So if you see any areas that aren't shiny, you want to make sure you go back over those, because if you put that dauber on top of it and it's not embossed, it will just pick up that embossing powder onto your little dauber there. So now again, I'm going to overlap onto that pink just a little bit, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of the butterfly. And now where these two colors overlap, the wild honey and the picked raspberry overlap, I'm going to get this beautiful coral color. So I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that on. And then you want to just tap off that excess. Again, I'll put that right back in the container. And then I can go ahead and heat set this, and you'll see this beautiful color that we get in between. You can see that beautiful coral color that we're getting. So even though we only use 3 colors of the Distress Embossing Glaze, we are getting 5 colors here. So now I'm going to flip this around and do the exact same process. So I'm going to grab that picked raspberry again, going right up to that Wilted Violet and going over it just a little bit so that we get another color in there. And you do want to use an up and down motion. I found that to be easier. And to release more ink from that dauber, you just want to press it down onto your glass media mat or onto your scrap paper there, and it will release a little bit more ink. But you don't want to get too much. You just want a nice even coating of this. Now there is another dauber available that's by Tim Holtz, and that one I believe has a felt tip on top. This one has a sponge tip, but either one of these would work just fine. And I will list and link all of those products down below for you, as well as on my blog. So again, I've heat set that, and I'm going to add that wild honey again, and again we're going to get that nice overlap here. Now you could certainly use as many colors as you want here, but do keep in mind when you're selecting your colors that where they overlap, you want to get a pretty color. You don't want to get a muddy color. So you want to kind of be conscious of that as you're selecting your colors. Now I wanted the antennas to be in that wild honey, So I added a little bit of ink right there. You can see I got a little bit on the top of the butterfly, the little head of the butterfly there. So you can just brush that away with your fingers and then go ahead and heat set that. And you can also just heat set it with it on there and you'll get a little bit of a two-tone there as well. So either way is fine. So now you can see we have this gorgeous butterfly. I just love this. And you can see that all that printing still shows through. We haven't covered any of that. So again, going back to the translucent nature of these is what makes these so unique and so interesting. So now I'm going to grab 3 more colors here. So this time I've got the Twisted Citron, the Salty Ocean, and going back to that Wilted Violet again. I'm going to start again in the middle with the Wilted Violet. And again, I'm kind of using an up and down dabbing motion here to apply that ink. And I want a nice even coating, so I don't want that dabber to be too wet as I'm doing this. And you can just check that on your scrap paper before you go to your cardstock. And then again, I'm going back to the spoon because I do want to control where that goes. So if I had put a little bit too much ink on there, I don't need to worry because I am controlling where that embossing powder goes by using this small spoon. You could also just use your fingers, just take a little pinch of color and just kind of pinch it and then drop that right onto your butterfly where you want that to be. But I found the spoon to be nice and easy. And again, it allowed me to have a little bit more control here. So I'll tap away any excess and I'm going to start that same process again. Now you can see here again, it's a little bit light. You can see some of that white cardstock showing through. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more color here, another layer. And you can layer this up as much or as little as you like. Again, do what appeals to you here. I just wanted the center of the butterfly to be a little bit darker. So I'll tap off that excess and now let's go to the next color, which is the Salty Ocean. So now I'm again going to bring out that embossing ink a little bit further on the butterfly wings here. Then I'll apply that Salty Ocean. And these two are going to blend together beautifully. And remember, your embossing ink stays wet quite a long while. So I can go ahead and ink up both sides of these and then do my embossing all at one time here. And now you see that beautiful overlapping of color that we get. I just think that is gorgeous. Now you could certainly apply some ink color underneath these glazes. So you could take the coordinating ink color, do a little ink blending, and then add your glaze over top in the coordinating color. And that's just going to intensify that color a little bit more. So that's something fun that I'll try to play with that in the future a little bit. Now here I'm going to add as my last color that Twisted Citron. And again, I'm overlapping those two colors. Now you could also use an embossing pen to apply the clear ink, the embossing ink, using a Versamark pen or the Tim Holtz Distress embossing pens. So either of those would work to lay down that clear embossing ink and then go ahead and add your powder. So again, that's going to give you a lot more detail. Another fun thing to do would be to add some of the glaze to some of your colored die cuts. Tim Holtz has some beautiful ones in the Ideology collection. The layers ones has the beautiful butterflies and botanicals, and also on the paper dolls as well. So keep that in mind. Just by adding a little bit of color on some of those die cuts, you could add more of a vintage look as well by using some of the distressed colors in like a walnut stain or vintage photo. Something like that would be really pretty. So now I want to do the butterfly antenna here. I'm going to just dab a little bit of that ink on, and then I'm going to go back to that wild honey and add a little bit of that on the antennas. And here I'm using that spoon again just so I can be kind of precise about where I place that embossing powder. And then I'm adding a little bit of the twisted citron over the top of that as well. So I'm just kind of mixing those two colors. And then as a final step, I'm just putting a little bit of ink right on the very end of the antenna, and I'm going to go ahead and emboss that. And that's going to give just a little bit more definition to the antennas there. And then I noticed there was a little area here that didn't have as much powder on it as I would have liked. So I'm just going to add a little bit more ink there and some powder and go ahead and heat set that. Here's a closer look at these butterflies. So now I want to create the background for my card. So I'm using the Sizzix 3D texture fades. This is called Lumber. And again, this is from Tim Holtz. And you're going to get this really nice embossed wood grain background. I'm just using some 100-pound vanilla cardstock, and I'm going to run that through. And I like to use 2 pieces of cardboard. You could stack up some cardstock as well, but you should use the instructions for your specific machine, but this is what works for me. If it's too thick, if it's too tight, you don't want to run it through. You want to back it out and remove a piece of cardboard or some cardstock. So you do want to make sure that you don't force it through. So now you can see that we have this beautiful 3D embossed lumber background. I'm going to go ahead and run that through again. Again, just stacking up those 2 pieces of cardboard, and I run it through 2 times. So now that we have that all set, we're going to use these on our background. So I'm starting off with the Distress Oxide ink in the antique linen, and I'm going to use one of my medium-sized Hero Arts blending brushes, and I'm going to go ahead and blend that ink all over. So I just blended the entire panel. Now I'm going to come back in with a little bit more around the edges and on the corners. So I'm starting with this color. We're going to be adding 2 more colors to this because we do want to get a nice wood grain background here. So now that I've done that, I'm coming in with the brush Corduroy, and I'm going to go around the edges. Again, adding a little bit more to those corners. And then I'll bring some of that color in on this panel as well. So I'm just kind of brushing it on in some of those areas where you see the little knots in that wood grain. So I'm just kind of blending that in. And then I can go back with that lighter color and blend that out a little bit. And then the last color I'm using here is the black soot. So I'm just going to use a little bit smaller brush here, and I'm going to go right around those edges. Now I want to add some onto this cardstock as well, so I'm going to on this panel as well. So I'm kind of dry brushing it on a little bit here. I'm taking the ink and just kind of using very little of it, just kind of tapping it onto that mat first and then bringing it onto the cardstock. Now, and then I'm adding a little bit darker tone to the edges here. So you can play around with this. I can play around with this all day long. This is something that I love to do. I love doing these wood grain backgrounds. And every time you do it, it looks different. So it's fun too to pick out the colors of wood grain you want to combine. But there you can see up close. And then I'm going to do the same thing for that other panel as well. So you can see both of those. So now I'm going to create my card base. I've got some black licorice cardstock. This is a 100-pound, which measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I'm scoring that at 5 1/2 inches. That'll be a top folding A2 size card. So I'm just going to press that out with my bone folder. And those two will measure 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. So I want to cut these down just a little bit. These two panels were 4¼ by 5½. So I want a little black edge around my card. So I'm going to trim a little bit off all the way around. So this will measure 5¼ by 4 inches. And I'm using my Tim Holtz paper trimmer to do this. So now you can see that'll leave that pretty black border all the way around. And now I've got my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and I'm going to glue this down. So you can see we're only using part of the butterfly here. So I'm going to grab my pencil and just kind of mark where I need that adhesive to end. So I won't need to put adhesive on this entire piece. So I'm again using that Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, which is a nice strong adhesive, and then I'm going to place this down on this wood grain panel. Once I've done that, I can go ahead and cut away any excess. I'm using my Tim Holtz 9½ inch shears to do that because I want to get a nice edge there. I don't want to, if you use a smaller scissors, sometimes you get kind of a choppy edge. By using those nice long scissors, you can get a nice smooth cut. And then that leftover part of the butterfly, I feel like I'm going to use that for something else. I'm going to hang on to those. Now here I've glued this second one down as well. I'm just pressing that out with some scrap paper here. And then I'll go ahead and cut away the excess on this one. And I'm going to have to find something to do with that leftover piece there because it's just so pretty. So now I've got these two panels ready. Let's go ahead and glue those to the card base. And you do want to use plenty of adhesive there because it is a 3D embossed piece of cardstock. So you want to make sure you hit enough of those high spots so that it'll stick down really well. And I'm centering it on that card panel. And then again, I'm using my scrap paper to press that out. I'll do the same thing for the second one. And by using the glue, it gives you a little time to move that panel around if you need to make sure it's centered really well. So now let's add a few little embellishments here. I've got these pearl mix sequins from the Picket Fence Studio collection. And then I've also got the sequins mix from that same Picket Fence Studios. And I'm going to add a few of these. Now from this pearl mix, these have a two-tone look. These are brand new. And this color combination is called Bright Pink and Coral. And so you get that two-toned effect right in the pearl. And it just adds a lot of interest here. And then for this one here, I'm going to grab those kind of bluish, aqua blue sequins from that mix. And I'm going to go ahead and I just added 3 of each of these little embellishments to each of the butterflies. Now here, I think you can get a better look at that two-toned effect on those little pearls. And then here we have those pretty sequins. So once that was all set, I set that aside to dry, and now I'm using my label stickers from Tim Holtz. This one is called Thoughts, and you can see all these cute little sentiments you get. And then this little set here is called Sentiments, and it's a lot of celebratory ones. Birthday, congratulations, it's your day, be brave, things like that. So these I thought would work really well. So I grabbed this one from the Thought set, and that says Free to Fly. Now I'm just sticking it down onto some black 100 pounds cardstock, and then I'm going to cut away any excess. And in order to get this a little bit thicker, I wanted it to feel like a chipboard embellishment. So I just decided to layer up some cardstock here. Now you could certainly just add some foam mounting tape, but I really wanted it to look like a piece of chipboard. So I'm going to just keep layering this up. I think I added about 4 layers behind this. And then that'll just pop up nicely on our card. And I did the same thing for this other one here. And the other one I selected says Shine Brightly. So I've placed these on my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station. And that's just to make it easier for me to line up my sentiments. I've just placed that magnet right on the center of each of these cards, and that'll just hold it down while I glue these in place. Again, I'm going back to that Nouveau Deluxe adhesive. I'm going to place these kind of towards the bottom right hand side of my card panel here. Then I've just placed an acrylic block on there, and I'm going to let that dry. So let me give you a closer look at the finished cards. And we have that beautiful wood grain background. And again, you can see that printing coming through on the butterflies because of the translucent nature of these embossing glazes. And then we have those beautiful little embellishments on there. Other than that, I kept the cards fairly simple. I really wanted those butterflies to stand out. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.